Hey, good morning. This is Steve from Bible Crossroads. And today I'd like to discuss the difference between mythology and theology. And as when I went to seminary, one of the first things that they said to me was kind of offensive. They said, "We don't really care what your opinion is." I said, "What?" Because it was an uneducated opinion, honestly. I mean, that was their viewpoint on it. And they said, if you want to develop an opinion, you have to research what other people have said about it. And they had all these other people who said things about things that they had different viewpoints. And the point was to study what other people has said about things so you can learn and develop your opinion with authority. And that was the difference, is when you critically analyze something, you think through it. Theology that I studied, you have to prove it's true. And that's what crosses the bridge between mythology, what man says, and theology, the study of God. It's not the study of myths, it's the study of God. There's a big difference. I was confronted by my child's teachers who were presenting Christianity as mythology, and they said basically it's all the same. And you could say that of all the different religions in the world except for Christianity, because in Christianity there is a huge difference between Christianity and every other religion, even the common religions of this age. Whether it be the Muslim religion where Muhammad comes and said this is what the truth is, or Buddha, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Those are all what man says of the revelation that was given to them. But Christianity is entirely different. Why do I say that? Well, because Jesus, a man, claimed to be God. It wasn't just that he was speaking for God and laying things out. No, he claimed to be God. And in fact, the Jews viewed that as blasphemy and they crucified him for it. And in fact, from God's perspective, he was crucified for our sin. That's why he came to die, for our sin, which is incredible in itself. But let's talk about the validity of Christ and the validity of some of his claims. Now, Jesus claimed to be God, and he was a man. He walked among us. He ate with us. He looked like everyone else. He worked as a carpenter. Talk about a regular guy. He was a carpenter. Yet he claimed to be God. So he either nuts, totally nuts, or he really was God. Now, Jesus, to prove who he said he was, what would he have to do to prove that? What proofs would he have to set forth? Well, one thing he did is he healed people. Like he'd tell a guy that's laying there with lame legs, get up and walk. This one guy in particular, he didn't have any eyesight. He was born blind. He didn't have eyeballs. And Jesus put clay in his eyes. He says, go wash in the pool of Siloam. And he goes and he washes. And now he can see. He was born blind. He didn't have eyeballs to see with. And God gives him eyes so that he can see. I can't wait to hear that guy's story when we get to heaven. What a marvelous thing that Jesus did for this guy. But only God could heal people like that. Only God could. What else did he do? Well, he had authority over the weather. He said to the storm, be calm, and it was calm. He walked on the water. He had authority over matter. He changed water into wine. He walked on the water. He fed 5,000 with just a few loaves and a few fish. He created matter. He's God, creator, God. He demonstrated authority over his creation, and he demonstrated that he could create himself. He multiplied fish. He provided food for his disciples. He said, throw your nets over there, and their nets were full after they didn't receive anything all night long of fishing. Jesus filled their nets for them. And he also had authority over spiritual matters as well. There was demonic people who were filled with demons, and he commanded the demons to come out of those people. One guy was filled with a legion of demons, and he commanded the demons to leave and go into the herd of swine, and they jumped off the cliff into the sea. Amazing. He had authority over spiritual things, authorities and realms that we don't even understand here in this world, but that's working behind the scenes, and he had authority over all of that. And the main thing, the biggest thing, the whopper of them all, if you will, he had authority even over death. He commanded Lazarus to come forth, and Lazarus, after his body was in a state of decay, and the scriptures are quite thorough on that one. And in fact, Jesus delayed to come to Lazarus so that they knew his body was in a state of decay. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this, and he said, Lazarus, come forth. And he was raised from the dead. There was another boy that had died, and he raised him from the dead as well. And not only that, but Jesus, God and man, raised himself from the dead. He had authority to lay down his life, and he had authority to pick it up again. Now, that's all well and good, and that is what the scriptures say that Jesus did. But how do we know that's really true? How do we know that's really true? Someone could have just made it all up. Well, here's the thing. Here's the second part of this question that goes along with the first part, is that the disciples that walked with Jesus, that slept with Jesus, that worked with Jesus for 3 years. Now, if you were living with someone and working with someone on a daily basis, do you think you'd know them pretty good? Oh, yeah. You'd know them really good. You'd know who snores at night. You'd know who's a reliable person, who's more I don't know, just flies off and does emotional things. You know the differences between all these different people that you're with. And all of these disciples looked at Jesus and they walked with him. And not only the 12, and Judas denied Jesus for money. He turned away and betrayed him, obviously. And that's interesting. Talk about a walk in darkness there. But the Apostle Paul was brought in, and there were others that walked with Jesus as well, not just the 12. But my point is, these people walked with Jesus. They knew Jesus. They knew him really, really, really well. And they witnessed the signs that he performed, the healings, the walking on the water, the command over the weather, the authority over demons, the fact that he died on the cross. And they watched him die. And the fact that he came back to life and restored their hope. Man, you talk. And he walked among them for 40 days. 40 days he walked among them. And he performed miracles. And he did all these things in their midst. And they watched him as he ascended to heaven. Now these same disciples who wrote down what Jesus did, one, but they did something else that kind of seals the deal. They died for their testimony. Well, the Apostle John, they tried to kill him, but they weren't able to, and they shipped him off to Patmos on a penal colony. But the rest of the disciples died, to include the Apostle Paul. And not just the 12, but there were hundreds and thousands and millions of people have died for their testimony concerning Jesus. But these people in particular, those who walked with Jesus during the apostolic age, these people saw the miracles. They saw what Jesus did, and they their testimony to the other people. That's what they died for. They wouldn't recant. And all they'd have to do is say, no, I was just kidding. And they wouldn't have been killed. No one dies for a lie. No one does that. But they will die for the truth. Stephen, for example, looked up, and as he was being stoned, sees Jesus seated at the right hand of God. And he receives the stone that puts him to physical death. But he lives on, obviously, as an example. The people who saw Jesus, who walked with him, who saw him raised from the dead, died for their testimony concerning Jesus. And this is reliable testimony that will stand up in a court of law today. Someone on their deathbed that gives a witness statement of what they saw. They have no reason to lie about things. They're going to die, and they know it. These people died for their testimony, and they knew it. And they didn't turn back. They didn't recant. Amazing. So, when you consider Christianity, don't put it in the same category as everything else, because it's not. It's in a whole different category. And critically look through it. Look at it. Look at what Jesus did. And understand the disciples died for their testimony, which seals the testimony of what Jesus did in the first place. If it was just Jesus and he did all these things, that's one thing. That proves who he is. But the reliable testimony of the disciples themselves seals the fact that Jesus did these things. And that if Jesus did these things and he is who he said he was, then the next question is, what are you going to do about it? We all have to do something with Jesus. He's like gravity. You can't escape gravity. I can say that gravity doesn't exist, but guess what? Here I am sitting on the earth. You can deny that Jesus exists. But here's the thing. You will either be redeemed by him or you will be judged by him. It's your choice. Clearly it's your choice. And I pray you make a choice to walk by the light. And I've walked in darkness before. I understand that. You can't see the light. But I wanted to present this in a way that maybe you can look at this and say, maybe this Jesus is real. Maybe I ought to give him a chance. Because if he is who he said he is, I don't want to miss out on this one. It's like the deal of the century. But the reality is, people walk in darkness and they don't want the light. They love their darkness rather than light. But I do pray that you see the light. That's the whole point of this. Anyways, hey, the Lord bless your heart and mind, and walk with the Lord Jesus, because he's worth it. And he's real. I'll testify to that. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.